Welcome back! My name is Baller Scuba. This is Video Games Over Time. We are still in 1984, and we are still talking about Hydlide. When we last left off, we beat the game. We were able to get all of the fairies together. We were able to defeat the evil Borealis, depending on your translation. We were able to save the princess and save the world and beat the game. And everything is good now forever. Possibly in the world of Hydlide. So now let's talk about how the game holds up today. And the question I always ask myself to start these is, did I have fun playing Hydlide? And the answer is yes, but with a little disclaimer, and that I didn't always have fun playing Hydlide. There were definitely some moments where the game became frustrating, where the level grinding that I had to do was just a bit too much. So, if you're a modern gamer trying to go back to this game, you have to know that you're going to be sinking quite a bit of time into things that aren't pushing the gameplay or the story forward. I would say that overall, the game probably takes about 15 minutes. If you're just looking at how long it takes to do the things required to win. And if you start the game at max level, you can probably blast through the game in about 15 minutes and just win, and that's it. But with all the level grinding to get up to the proper levels, with all the dying and reloading that I had to do, all that kind of stuff added up to around 4 to 5 hours of me playing the game. We have played games with worse ratios to that, of me prepping versus me actually getting through the game, but it's not by a lot. And I have to point out that there are significant portions of this game that do feel not as fun, because you're trying to go through other steps of the process in order to make it through the game, but you're not actually feeling like you're playing the game. The balance is just off for me. And a couple of the most egregious examples I can think of would be the maze with the wisps. That was pretty bad. That was very difficult, and sure, like, maybe it was just luck, maybe there's a little bit more strategy that I could have used, but the fact that I ended up going through that maze probably about 25, 30 times, you guys didn't see all the attempts that I made trying to get through that maze, and I just kept dying and dying and dying, because the will-o-wisps can kill me in like 2 or 3 hits, and then I'm also losing health trying to get through that. That was not fun. And maybe I could have put off that maze until later, until I was a higher level, but that sword is what made it a lot easier to get to that level. So that was kind of a proper spot for it, because I could survive 2 hits usually from the wisps. That was the proper spot for me to try to get the sword, but at the same time, it was still really difficult to get that sword. Another example would be at the end, when I'm fighting Borealis. I did what I was supposed to do. I was in defense mode. I had the cup. I was max level. I fought him as best as I could, but I still had to back off and get my full health back at least once in order to win. It was still very close at the end. If he warped a couple more times while I was fighting him, I would have lost again without doing another round of heals. And that healing took me about 10 minutes to do. And sure, that was including times that I had to reload because I would get cornered by the enemies that I was trying to avoid fighting and I just couldn't get around them. But, it shouldn't take you 10 minutes of dancing around to get back to full health. So there are some balance issues that the game has. So those are kind of my complaints about it. But ultimately I still had fun. It's still a good action RPG. It's still an early action RPG, so there's going to be issues, right? We don't have a lot of examples for the game to work on when it comes to action RPGs. It's still a very developing genre, and sure, there are other games that they did have examples for. Tower of Druaga. I almost called it Tower of Hydlide. Tower of Druaga and Dragon Slayer kind of being the chief examples of other games that already did exist. I did say during my introduction that the creator of the game, the creator of Hydlide, said that the other games, said that Dragon Slayer didn't have an impact on the development of Hydlide. It's a little difficult to believe that from an outside perspective, because at least the user interface, what the screen looks like, is so similar between Hydlide and Dragon Slayer. It's hard to imagine that there wasn't at least some impact on it. It's hard to look at just the screens and how it's set up, with pretty much everything taking up the user interface, basically taking up the entire right side of the screen, with the health and experience and strength over on the right. Very similar to what Dragon Slayer was doing. So there probably is some impact there. And of course, Tower of Druaga is a very chief example of an action RPG. Granted, it's an arcade game, so there's going to be some changes, but it's hard not to see the comparisons between the two. But those are pretty much the only two other games, and those two other games also have issues. So you're going to have these kinds of issues in early genre titles, but I think that this is a good step forward for the genre. We are seeing some improvements, I would say. I do like that there is more of a story this time. It's about the same as Tower of Druaga at the end of it, but at least they tried to put a little bit of effort into an introduction. I should point out that the introduction that I was able to use is a little bit shorter than the original one in the PC-88 version. It is a little bit longer, but I couldn't find a good translation of it, and I'm not trusting the translations that I'm able to make for it because I don't speak Japanese. But the translations I was able to make didn't make sense in English, but it was definitely longer. And there was a little bit more information in the original introduction than the one I was able to get in English. But ultimately, the story is pretty short. It's, a bad thing happened. You have to get the fairies together and defeat the big bad enemy. But along the way, you will save the princess. But that's about it. I look forward to the development of this genre. This genre, I feel, has a lot of potential, this action RPG genre. Maybe that's just my bias of knowing where things go. But ultimately, I do enjoy the game. The graphics, I think, are pretty good for the time. I think that the bright red, well, not necessarily bright, but the red on the user interface probably didn't age all that well. It might be a little bit hard to look at for some people, but ultimately I think the graphics in the game worked really well. Everything looked like it was supposed to. It did take me a little bit to figure out what the scorpions were, but outside of that, everything looked like it was supposed to. Everything functioned the way that it was supposed to. I never in the game thought, hey, I should have, done this and my character did something else instead. The controls are very basic, so that made a lot of sense. The gameplay, I think, holds up pretty well. I just wish that the health regeneration was balanced a little bit better. There's just some balance issues that need to be worked out. But ultimately, I think the gameplay works very well. The biggest issue technically for me would be the sound. The sound was just not particularly good or enjoyable for me. And the fact that it was the same throughout the entire game, which once again isn't very long, but it is the same throughout the game, and it was a little aggravating at points. The sound needed work, and that doesn't hold up well. But ultimately, if you're looking at this from a modern perspective, the question I always do at the end is this a game I would recommend to a modern gamer? That didn't play the game growing up? And the answer to that one would be yes, if. And the answer, it's a very big if. If you are interested in the history of role-playing games, and specifically action role-playing games, I feel that this game is an important step along the way, and it's worth checking out. With that said, though, maybe you just want to watch somebody do it, and you don't have to go through the extra time that it would take to actually play the game yourself, and you can just watch somebody else do it in a significantly shorter amount of time. And that's my modern take on the game. When the game was released, Hydlide proved to be popular. Across the different Japanese computer releases, Hydlide would sell 1 million copies, the first Japanese computer game to reach that number. The game was seen as quite an innovation in Japan. Not only is Hydlide considered one of the first action RPGs, it's also considered one of the first open world games, one of the first games to use health regeneration, and one of the first games to use a quick save mechanic that can be used at any time. Many games and game creators are said to have been inspired by Hydlide. Hydlide would see ports, sequels, and remakes, including a port that would be released in Europe in 1985. We will keep an eye on some of these as we continue. As for T&E Soft, they would continue to create video games, being able to capitalize on the best-selling Japanese computer game. We will hear from T&E Soft again. As for Tokihiro Naito, he would also continue to create video games, so we will hear from Tokihiro Naito again, although perhaps only briefly. That will do it for the story of Hydlide for now. My name is Baller Scuba. This has been Video Games Over Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video when we do things by hand.